with Oliver Smith on Citizens for Community Media. Known Oliver basically only a couple years or a year. We have a men's group that we even met today.
Yes.
There was 15 of us, and you were the youngest.
Oh, yeah. That's hard to imagine, okay.
So,
but we still have all the same concerns because the absences of parents, men in the home, it affects everybody.
right, the name of the show here is Fathers in the Home. And you bring it up because this is a group that is from all over South Bend. And they're men that are concerned about the health of the community.
Yeah.
And some people like the fact that we meet because we get good guests. Last time I don't think you were there, but we had the head of the athletic department for South Bend.
Yeah, we do have very informative people coming throughout the meetings, which is great.
Yeah.
And like I say, and the whole purpose of the thing is, to try to make the community better and working with and we have a great problem with in our community with children, and that always leads back to the stability of the household. Number one, we just have to face the fact that we have houses that are just led by women. And I mean, that's just been the fact. I mean, that's a fact for the reasons that's been intentional. You go back. I mean, everybody, you think, the welfare system is such a good system, but it was set up to help the families that was at war and everything, and the mothers was at home by themselves, so they helped raise the children and everything. But it was a study found out in about 30 years after the welfare system was in effect, because in the beginning it wasn't set up for black people. People don't like to mention. I mean, when the black family was allowed to come on the welfare system, it was determined, and not only determined that, but there were studies done that showed that the breakdown of the family was related to the welfare system because people wasn't working. So that's why, and the white families was going back to work. So at that time, that's when they allowed, after the studies was shown that this was going to destroy the families by putting people on welfare systems. They allowed the black families to get on the welfare system, and then they began to enforce the practice that if you had men in the home, you couldn't get the checks.
Well, let me read that scripture that we were going to start out with, because I'm going to make a connection to what you're saying. Ephesians 3:14, it says, "For this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory he may grant you to be strengthened with might through his Spirit in the inner man." But I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named. So somebody's named, but who's the father of the home? Well, I'm the father, let's say.
Yeah, the man is supposed to be
Well,
the
where do you
father.
get that name, Father? You get it
From the Father.
from the Father. And then Paul says a couple chapters later, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
Yes.
And now, even more devastating than the welfare system, and that's a discussion people are going to go either way on, but I think the argument's going to go more in your favor.
Well, it's really not my favor, but it's just a social. It's a social issue, actually.
Yeah, but I was trying to get Judy to come on, but she didn't want to come on. But that's all right. But she's famous for telling me that she taught 42 years, South Bend schools, mostly special ed, mostly black. And one day, the head of her department, who happened to get Teacher of the Year, I guess the same year, walked into her class and told the students in her class that they did not have to obey Judy. Okay. Now I told that to Howard, Howard's in our group, and he wouldn't believe it. But I asked Judy again. She said no. She said she walked in the head of her department, and says, inform those students, you do not have to obey. Now this raises the question, okay, does the wife, under our legal system, you're talking about how bad the welfare is, does the wife, according to the Bible, does the wife have to obey her husband if he's telling her to do something that is legitimate, reasonable, and not sinful? Does she have to obey her husband?
Simple. Or as long as it's not illegal or something like that, and she have a right to obey the husband. I mean, why not?
She has a duty. Do children have to obey their parents? According to, it says, I mean, right here, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right.
Well, there's only a few problems with that, since the families are not together today. We're not in a society where there are families together, where you can use these principles. Fathers are not there, and fathers are not even in churches to learn the principles of the Bible.
Well, today you brought a point, because we had the meeting at noon, and one was that the girls are getting pregnant outside of wedlock, and they're not taking control of that.
Yeah.
And then one guy stood up and said, yeah, but what about the men? They're responsible. So if you can't control that, then these children come into the world without parents, really.
Well, you don't, not without them, but you come
not
in with,
not there in the
you
home.
come in there with parents, but you just don't have responsible parents. And they was, this conversation, I guess, was a little deeper, because they was talking about even to the point of abortions and that type of situation, when they was talking about the women and the situations where the man's responsible or the woman are responsible. And, we're living in a society where you spend billions of dollars in order for people to have an abortion, but you're not spending the billions of dollars to stop people from getting pregnant.
That was your point.
Yeah, there's no focus on not getting pregnant. It's just the abortion part. We're just gonna, and then you say who, definitely you want women have rights, but I mean, you say, well, do a child have a right?
But does a woman or any human being have a right to have sex outside of marriage, according to the Bible? Do they have a right to have sex outside of marriage?
Yeah, but if you're not, if you're not a Christian, then you're not under. They say they're not under the rules. You're not under the rules of the Bible.
Okay. Do you have a right to commit abortion? I mean, no. Do you have a right to commit adultery just because you're not a Christian?
Now, because all these standards shouldn't, all the 10 Commandments and all the what you shouldn't and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. I mean, if you are a Christian, then those are the rules that you're supposed to follow. But people that are not saved or anything, they say, well, we don't have to follow those rules because we're not Christians. And people say, well, you're going to go to hell if you not following the rules and you're not a Christian and all that. And people say, well, I'll just go to hell. So what can you do about that? Because they have the right to do that.
Well, the 10 Commandments are illegal in any government building. You cannot put the 10 Commandments in the public school. You can put other things, but you can't put that. But if we had the 10 Commandments, you would see one that says, thou shalt not commit adultery. And then right next to it is, thou shalt not murder. So is the person going to say, well, I'm not a Christian, so I'm not bound by thou shalt not murder. If I want to murder, I should be free to murder.
And even before God gave those rules, it wasn't no law against murdering. Because the two sons, the first one got murdered, it wasn't no law against murdering. That's why he gave the rules, thou shalt not murder. Before then, I mean, it was, it wasn't supposed to, but
I agree with you.
That's when the rules came up.
I
agree.
agree.
Book gave you all the rules.
Because
but there are people say, I'm not under the rules because I'm not a Christian, but being a Christian, you have to follow the rules. But those are the things that people will say, and then you can say, well, how can you say that if you're not? But
well, Cain said, God said to Cain after he killed Abel, God says, where is Abel, your brother?
Yes.
And he said, I do not know.
Yeah.
Am I my brother's keeper?
Yeah.
In other words, there's no law.
Well, no law against killing his brother right then. That's why after he left, God put a sign on his head and said, nobody gonna kill you after you left, because there wasn't no law. Everybody wanted to kill him, but wasn't no law against murder. So so you couldn't kill him. God put a law, said nobody can touch him after he killed his brother. See, because there wasn't no law before then.
But that shows you, God created Adam and Eve perfect.
Yes, he did.
Basically. because you could argue if they were perfect, then they would have never.
No, yeah, they wasn't. They was perfect.
It was
they
very
didn't know
good.
they was already God. They just didn't realize
But
it.
then they sinned, and now the curse comes with that sin. You call it original sin. And what's the first thing we see from the first person that comes out of a woman's womb?
Yeah, it was murder.
So you know people are bad.
Yeah, that's
People
it.
are bad. And here's the point. If you don't have two parents that know what they're doing and are ready to be parents, there's so much potential evil in that child. No one wants to think that. They think, oh, these are my angels. No, if they were angels, why did the first person, who's superior to everybody else, come on, he's the first one.
Yeah.
And the best that we got kills his brother.
Yeah, I just thought about that. You know, if that would have been the absolute perfect family that there could ever have been, because they were the first family, and then their son murdered somebody. So look at today. So what can you say? You know, the first two, they had a son that murdered somebody, the first two, and they were supposed to have been absolutely perfect with no kind of sin or nothing. You know, well, they had sin. They the one started all the stuff, you know, from the enemy started all the stuff from the beginning, but they were the one involved. And murder and sin and all that stuff is going to be here until the devil is gone. And that's why he's still here now running the planet. He's not bound. He's right here right now running this. He's still running things.
But like the people that passed that law to promote this welfare, and then the father's not there rewarding the man not to be in the home, that was very stupid legislation.
Well, but like I said, that was the purpose of that system. That when they asked in the 60s, was it before the 60s, and when blacks was allowed to get on welfare, they wasn't enforcing that man couldn't live in the household with the white person. But when the woman got in there, they made it absolutely perfect that if a black man was found, if a man was found in your home, you was going to lose your check. And they had set up statuses where if you had 2 or 3 kids, we would give you so much money every month that you didn't have to work. You see, that was all for the decline of the family.
But see, if we were smart, if we had statesmen, if we had wise politicians, okay, they call it majoring in political science. They used to call it Christian politics. Okay, now it's science instead of the Bible. Okay, but here it says Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, chapter 2, verse 15. Has not the one God made and sustained us for the spirit of life? And what does he desire? Godly offspring. So take heed to yourselves, and let none be faithless to the wife of his youth. For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel. Okay, so this was well known. Okay, that's Old Testament. The New Testament supports that the purpose of marriage is primarily godly offspring, not just offspring.
Yeah.
Okay. You could go to.
And I have absolutely no problem with that. But first of all, you got to get the parents godly before they can teach the children. I mean, you're in a time where we're in a society where it's just teaching that non-Christianity stuff. You don't need. You can be your own God. You can do your own thing. You can get to God by yourself. You can just pray and ask and all this kind of stuff. And this is just make up stuff. People that are smart, considered educated and wealthy, they just get on television and on these chat lines and make up things, and people follow them because they think they know everything because they're so wealthy.
But if they're not speaking according to the law and the testimony, like it says,
then
there's no light in them.
Yeah, but see, people don't know what the law. There's even people in the church that don't know. People in the church, my brother, don't bring Bibles to church. That's your weapon. If anybody ever been in a war, the number one, your weapon is your number one tool. The Bible is your weapon. People come to church without bringing out even a Bible. They will listen. That's why they're so easily misled. They will listen to somebody preaching to them, and they don't even know if the person preaching to them is teaching out of the Bible. Because unless you're looking at the Bible and listen to what they're saying, they can say anything.
Well, it's what the Bereans were wiser than the Thessalonians. Okay, because they went to Scripture to see if what Paul was saying was actually true.
Absolutely. And any good preacher will be number one to tell you, get a Bible and check out what I'm saying.
Don't believe God. Don't be believing me.
No,
I'm doing the best I can to articulate what I believe the Word of God is saying.
Yes, and we have to follow. We're following God. People are following preachers. See, you can't be. You following leaders. God is the one that's doing. The Holy Spirit is the one doing the teachers. People are looking to leaders. People are looking at preachers and stuff and putting them on high pedestals, even though they're supposed to be respected for bringing the Word of God. But you see, God Himself got the Holy Spirit. He's the one that's giving you the teaching and the revelation of this Word.
Well, like they say in the club, maybe they haven't been saying it recently, but in the old days, you know, the guys, they always said, if you don't reach these children by 4th grade, you might as well forget it. Okay, because no, that's pretty strong, but the evidence is in talking to teachers, you know, and knowing that they're not listening to you after a certain point.
Absolutely, because I taught in preschool and daycare, and for years I taught kids for about 20 years in the same church. I was able to start out with kids when they was in preschool, see them grow up through high school and go off to college. After 20 years, you get there long enough for that. But we taught them in preschool reading Bible scriptures and everything. Then our after-school program was held in our church, in a basement of the church, and they would get to teach. And then we had Sunday school, the same people. We taught them the same thing. But you know, you're not getting that whole stability from communities now to raise children, because too many children are raising children. Young people are in their 20s and 30s, just reaching 30s, and grandparents. And the parents are 14 and 15. They can't teach, they're not even educated themselves. You don't know nothing at 15, 16.
You have to tell the children, like you said, preschool, you got to start early. Ideally, it's the parents that should be doing it more so than the church, okay? Because those children belong first to the parents, and then the church is helping out the parents. But they're not obligated, okay, but the point is, you tell these children at a young age, because girls are already playing dolls at a young age, okay? They're already trying to, you know, get themselves ready just by playing dolls. But you tell them the purpose of marriage is godly offspring. And if you don't proceed to have sex, and I don't know how you would say it, in a godly way, don't think you're going to, in an ungodly way, have sex and then have godly offspring from ungodliness. It's not going to happen. Yeah. You better be godly in your whole approach to the whole sexual matter, because you're laying a foundation of ungodliness, and your chances of producing godly offspring from total ungodliness going before that, you are delusional.
Yeah, but we're living in a society where young children are being taught to be sexually active. You can be when children can't even read, they're being taught that you can have your identity change, your sexual identity change at an age you can't even read in school. You can't give a kid an aspirin, but you can give them sex-changing drugs and stuff in school without even telling the parents.
Who's telling the child this? Where are the parents protecting their children? I thought parents' job is to protect their children.
You can think, but what are they telling the parents? And all the parents are not coming to all the meetings and all the things there. I mean, you have to find most of the things you have to find out when you're watching it on television and doing interviews and doing meetings and stuff to find out what's going on, because they're not telling everything, and the kids are not coming home and sharing different information. I mean, they say you can change your name. If you don't want to be, you want to be called a different name. If you're male or female, you can want to be called at school or something. You can demand that kind of thing. And I mean, so when you talk about the destruction of the families, I mean, you looking when you're saying that you're looking at television programs where preteens are being bullied and talked about if they're not having sex by the time they're 12 and 13. By the time you're a teenager, 13, 12, 13, you ain't had different sexual experiences. It ain't just one. You got to, they're teaching you should experiment to see if you're going to really like a man or a woman at a young age. I mean, that's the kind of stuff at school they're teaching. They ain't trying to teach you A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3. They're teaching all this sexual stuff and all this other stuff. I mean, because the whole system is not set up on a religious system. It's set up to defeat because the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. The enemy is the one in control of this planet.
Well, you have a testimony that thrust you in to seeing how bad it can be, because you came, if I remember right, you got an accent, because a lot of people sense an accent, because you're from Arkansas originally. Mm-hmm. And then you came to Detroit. And then you saw firsthand how bad it can be there, right?
Oh, with the
in the schools.
You can see the difference in the schools when you come from. Well, I can say it because I'm got some few years on me. I mean, in the South, what I had to deal with in the South was racism, because I came in Arkansas when I was still there during the time when you had to have the National Guards taking you into school. I was one of the first ones being bused into the other communities.
Were you Little Rock, or where were you from?
I was in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
Pine
we
Bluff.
was just further away.
Yeah.
But they was bigger, so they was getting the publicity, but we was little, and we was getting the abuse.
Yeah.
You see. So we had to go through all. I had to go through all that. I came up when they was asked. My grandparents would tell me, you go downtown, you have to look a white person. You have to look on the ground when you pass by a white person, because you couldn't look them in the eye. Yeah. And you couldn't go to the stores. And I grew up in a time where they had the lines where you sit over here, and they had a line where they didn't have a physical line, but they had a line that you didn't cross. You waited over here, you went to the back, and you got your food and all that kind of stuff. The white.
Well, I knew, because I worked in the jail a lot, in the chaplain's office. And I remember talking to one guy, and his dad, black fella, his dad, he's from the South, and his dad would give him a whooping if he found out that he didn't greet somebody on the street. In other words, they emphasized, and maybe that's outward, but it's that you better be greeting and saying hi to people.
Yeah.
You're not going to be somebody that's not friendly, and not walking in love, at least the outward show of love. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they are friendlier in the South in some ways.
Mm-hmm. There's one thing about the difference of the South and the North. The Southerners will let you know what they're taking and let you know who they are. Where there's hidden racism in the North. I mean, that's just the way it is. Because when I came here, I had actual contact with different racist people at a different big organization. I ran into one, Mm-hmm. And I mean, I never really faced it that way in the South, but I mean, it just didn't bother me. I just, to the point where, I mean, hatred is just hatred. There was a time when I thought that I used to didn't like folks. When I come here, first thing I done was just like everybody else from the South, join the NAACP and everything else, and I was the only one, we was marching and all that kind of stuff, Then actually when the good Lord put it on my heart that, there's gonna be people that they ain't gonna like you, and if you're gonna be like me, follow me, you gotta love everybody. That's when he told me I had an incident with some racists. And he had me to apologize because you represent me. And that was the first time hatred left my spirit. Mm-hmm. I mean, from that point, ain't pretty much nothing you can do that make me want to hate you.
Well, it says we have passed from death unto life, because we love the brethren.
Yes. And all the brothers, even those that don't like you, you got to love those even that don't like you.
Well, that's why I like that. Mm-hmm. The boy, he wasn't a boy, but he was telling me about how his father would give him a whooping if he didn't love.
Yeah.
When you're out there, you better be loving people.
Mm-hmm. And saying we live in, we're supposed, and as Christians, it's just wrong. Because we always talk about, I would, but I just can't. I'm supposed to, I'm not, but if you're Christian and you're supposed to be a Christian and you're supposed to love folks, you just got to do what you got to do. Because just saying that, I would, but I got to get over this, that don't work. Mm-mm. And people can know that and feel that and sense that. So, if you're going to be a follower of Christ, there's certain things you got to do. But if you're not, like I said, we're in a time where people are not. That's just the way it is. People are not, and even like I say, the people that are in the churches are the same people that you still got to deal with. Just because you're in the church, you're still in the church, and you're still ones with having problems, sexual problems out of wedlock, drug problems, alcohol. Just because you're in the church is full of us. Everybody in the church is the same as the sinners that's been saved.
Right, but
it's still us.
But if the salt loses its savor, the church is to be salt and light. And if there's just as much sin in the church, they're not going to get the job done.
No, you gotta, yeah.
It's important to live holy because
Absolutely.
That's our witness.
Yeah, so I mean, you gotta do yourself right when you're in the church. I mean, but there's a lot of bad people in the church. You can't go to judging people because everybody in the church got a problem. I don't care from the pulpit to the back door. No, everybody gonna leave out of here with a problem, but you ain't not.
It's always saying, do not speak evil of one another.
Nobody. Okay? Yeah.
So you got to really control yourself.
Yeah. Everybody's in there. They know somebody have done something, and they can't wait to get out of there. They see them in the church. Oh my goodness, do you see who was in there today? And you've been in there supposed to be worshiping the Lord.
You have to control that.
Yeah, but that's the way they go. You do hear what they said. Oh, what were they wearing? See, folks ain't coming to church for the right reason. They're not coming to worship God. They're not supposed to come on Sundays for praise and worship and to give God glory. I mean, folks ain't coming for that. Most folks coming to see who's looking good, who's dressing good, what you're wearing, what you're driving, but you ain't coming there for the Lord. So you're not wasting your time because you're supposed to assemble yourself. But if you're there for the right purposes, churches will be full.
Well, put it this way, okay. I think I know the church you're going to. It used to be Pastor Guyton.
Beautiful place.
Yes. And but let's say you were the pastor of that church. I mean, we know it. This is only hypothetical.
Yes.
But I've always thought that if you, as a pastor, or one of the elders, pastor's an elder, if you succeeded at getting the men, the fathers of the home, to raise their children up in the instruction and admonition of the Lord, like it says. Okay, do not provoke them to anger, but raise them up in the instruction of the Lord. Deuteronomy 6, diligently teach them when you rise up and when you go out in the way, be constantly teaching them the word. If you got your men, first of all, in a godly way, get married and then proceed to aim at godly offspring.
Yeah.
But to produce the children in an ungodly fashion,
I'm sorry.
You're so defeated at the start, I don't know if you'll ever recover, okay? But if you succeed in getting them to be godly in the way they engage the woman, and then if you succeed in getting them to actually raise their children like, let's say, Joseph did to Jesus, okay? That's a perfect example. Because by the time Jesus was 12, they were astonished at how well he knew the word, okay, in the synagogue. But then your church would really start to grow because the discipleship is taking place at the home level. But if you don't have strong discipleship taking place in the home, they're just scattered to the winds, and there's nothing there.
Yeah, well, the leadership is so important, because everybody, the church itself is as strong as the leader. And when you got you got the deacons and all those leaders, people look up to those group of people, mostly in the church. And if those people are not as strong as they're supposed to be, people will start judging them. Well, if they're not doing, they're doing this and I'm doing that, people are always looking at somebody else to judge how they're doing, to measure themselves of where they should be or how good they should be doing.
Okay, what do you think it says here? If anyone aspires to the office of bishop, which is an elder, and usually they're assuming many elders, okay, he desires a noble task. Now, a bishop must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, sensible, dignified, hospitable, an apt teacher, no drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, and no lover of money. He must manage his own household well. King James says rule. Keeping his children submissive and respectful in every way. King James says he must be able to rule his family, having his children in subjection with all gravity. But we understand that. So if you have an unruly, for if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how can he care for God's church? So you're modeling for all the other families. You're basically saying, in fact, I would argue, the one who should be the elder or the pastor, that's the main qualification. How well is he going to model? how to disciple the children. And because wisdom is justified by the children. See, sometimes they do emphasize that. I'm not saying they don't, but success is depending on how well they carry it out.
And the pastor himself, I mean, he's a great leader. I mean, you got to have, but he have to rely on his helpers, his deacons, or whatever the title might be that helps him. Because, the pastor can he can only do so much and be so strong, but there are different other titles and different jobs that's passed on that he's not supposed to be responsible for.
What he can do, no, you don't have to be married to be a pastor, but in this case, it's given the impression that most likely you would be. But if he can succeed at raising godly offspring and modeling that from the church, that can go a long way, because now every family is seeing, if I could do what the pastor does, if I could have devotions like he does, if I could discipline like how he does.
Yeah, you would think that would be perfect, but even pastors, they can't control. You can try to control your kids, but you can't, because even pastors have trouble with their kids just like everybody else. Because the kids themselves are individuals. You can teach them and install all these principles in them, install them the principles and everything, but you still can't make them stop from doing it. They still do things. Preachers' kids still, I can't say all of them, but they still have the capability of drinking and smoking and all that. They still can do that. That don't mean that they do, but they still have the same opportunity just like everybody else.
What do you think? Okay, the Old Testament, it's all about if you marry the wrong woman, the prophets would pull their hair out. They'd be so upset that they're marrying a woman outside the faith. Okay, not an Israelite or however.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but the New Testament, an unbeliever is not allowed. A believer is not allowed to marry an unbeliever.
Yes.
Okay.
You're supposed to marry. If you're a believer, you're supposed to marry a believer.
Right, because if you marry a woman that's not a believer,
that's going to be a little bit of chaos.
What's going to happen to the children?
Well, they're going to, the purpose, most people think that if I marry a believer, think I'm going to marry a non-believer, and then I'm going to eventually get them to become a believer.
But Paul says don't try to think that way.
But that's just the way most people think.
But you're commanded not to marry an unbeliever.
Yeah, well, like I say, it would be great if we had all the believers that we should have, and if we did have all the believers and they was following the rules, but we live in a society that we don't.
But if you were a pastor, would you marry somebody that?
Oh, a pastor probably wouldn't. No, a pastor wouldn't.
They wouldn't
do that.
marry.
No,
if you're marrying an unbeliever, he was not going to.
No, I doubt they would ever do that. No, I doubt that would probably happen. You would probably definitely marry somebody that's a believer. Yeah. You wouldn't want to marry a non-believer. That's going to be some problems right away. Two walk in opposite directions. So,
well, as a father in the home, if your daughter was attempting to marry an unbeliever, you as the father would say, I forbid that marriage.
Yeah, that was a time that all of those things. I'm just a realist. I'm a realist. There was a time when all those rules and things were supposed to be. I mean, if people get married nowadays, they're not even getting permission from the parents and fathers and stuff like they used to. And if a father's not in the home, we're still going back to the same old scenario. Ain't no fathers in the home to even talk to. When you're saying 50% of the homes are without parents, are one single parent families, 50%.
And the children need. I mean, when I hear stories of good homes, and when the father comes home, how the daughters just love to, they just run to their dad. They just love their father, right? It's just natural. Well, they don't have that. What happens if you don't have that? I mean, this is like their greatest need. I mean, they need their dad. They love their dad, and that's kind of a normal situation.
Well, you see that in the society. I mean, that's just where we are. I mean, we're just anti-marriage. And so you end up with nothing. People want offspring, but folks are not getting married. I mean, people are just not pushing getting married.
Okay, like in the club. Okay, in the club. A lot of guys were former teachers. A lot of guys were substitute teaching. And they could get paid maybe as high as $350 in Elkhart, just teaching one day. And they still won't do it. And they say, because there's no respect. We get no respect.
From the children. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to get no respect from the children because we are at a time where the society is just teaching that you're on your own. And when you're going in schools nowadays, you know, when the school actually started, when they was using the Bibles and everything for teaching tools and everything like that, and we had prayer and all that kind of stuff.
Way back.
Yeah, because the bottom line is knowing that the enemy is the one that's in control of these institutions. Just like people say, you know, you go to prisons, you need to go personally and pray in the prisons. You know, they want evangelists to go to prison. They want evangelists to go
we used to go to the prisons all the time.
Go to the nursing homes. They want evangelists to go there because why? Because those are institutions ran by the government. So they want us to take us personally because we represent Jesus, to take us personally into those places to preach to the people. That means that you can't pray, Lord, go to the prisons. Lord, go to the nursing home. No, he said he put us in charge. We are the ones that's supposed to go. When people making them kind of prayers, those are just empty prayers because he gave us permission to go. People go into the nursing homes and the prisons and pray. Okay, schools are no different from a prison or a nursing home. It's an institution that's ran by the government.
Public means government, legally.
Mm-hmm. Government owned by the government. So unless we would the Bible and Christ was kicked out of the schools.
Well, you know,
they was voted out. And you know what? The Christians went in and took the Bibles out when they voted them out. Instead of fighting to keep them in, they just went in and collected all the Bibles and left out. So now the church, the schools are without Jesus because you have to take him in there personally and pray.
When I taught at Adams High School, substitute taught for 8 years, and I was there. That was like the main school. It was more on the east side. I had Edison. And our church produced a Jesus newspaper. We had thousands of copies. And I wrote a feature article on the history of public education, the history of it, all the way up from the beginning till now.
Okay.
And I said the father of modern public education is John Dewey, and John Dewey said there's no soul, and there's no truth. I mean, I did the whole thorough job, and of course, they kicked me out of Adams. Okay, now I didn't even pass them out, but the Jewish lady, and it could have been anybody, but it just so happened to be a Jewish lady in charge of the journalism, the yearbook, and all that, completely lied. Because I wouldn't even be involved in that passing them out. I passed them out at Riley. I'm not there because I didn't want a conflict of interest. Okay, I was very careful. But she lied and said I was passing them out in the classroom, so they fired me. And eventually, and they said, well, you can teach in the other schools because they needed substitute teachers, of course. And I finally got kicked out of Tarkington, which is now a charter school, just for bringing a Bible in the classroom. The teacher saw me bring a Bible in the class, to only read to myself. And we took the case all the way to Supreme Court, took several years. It got front headlines for outside the country. They tried to black it out here, okay? But what harm was I causing?
Well, because the schools belong to the enemy. The enemy is in control of the schools. The enemy controls this planet. He controlling the schools. He's not for no Jesus is into the schools and all of that. That's why when we kicked them out. I mean, you can't pray for protection of your children when you're not even allowed to go into the building. But you see, us Christians, we the wimpiest group of, if it was a religion, we're not a religion, it's a relationship, first of all, being a Christian. Yeah. But as a religion, we the wimpiest ones of all, because all the other religions, they don't get out and march in groups and demand their rights. But you don't see no Christians out marching for nothing.
No, you're paying all this property tax. Yeah. Some cities are $30,000 per student, and they can't read hardly anything by 8th grade. They still get $30,000. So we pay all this money. Churches everywhere in town.
Everywhere.
And no one protests at all that you can't.
Don't protest.
I can't even bring a Bible. No, I was Notre Dame grad. I got a master's at Bethel. I was a chaplain in the jail. The main volunteer.
Yeah.
I had no marks against me.
Yeah. But when you come up and ask for a Christian, there ain't gonna be no helping.
You're out of there.
Because you know what? We just not gonna, us Christians ain't gonna do nothing but sit in church and look good. And when you come time for some work, you ain't gonna do no work. They're not doing the work. That's why the streets and are the way they are now. They're not standing up for nothing. We ain't standing up for nothing. Schools and everything are closing all around us. The schools right now that are opening, the charter schools and the Catholic schools and all that, they're in there praying. The charter schools, they're in there praying and they growing. These old public schools, they don't want nothing to do with Jesus, and all of them closing down. Listen, all of them closing down. Ever since they kicked Jesus out, they've been closing down ever since.
Well, I'll tell you this, when they kicked me out of Adams, within 2 weeks, now don't forget, I lived in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. I knew all these kids. There were some bad boys, but guess what? When you're in the neighborhood with them, mm-hmm. and they know what you stand for, and you know, that does tend to calm them down a bit, mm-hmm. right? Because they have a grandmother that's saved or somebody, and they grew up in church.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of being there,
mm-hmm.
and snatching them from the influence of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 weeks after that, they had like 14 squad cars, mm-hmm. because of fights. Never happened before. Because once you remove, and don't forget, I'm nothing, it's Christ, okay? Mm-hmm. You know, he uses me despite me, right? In spite of me.
Well, he do that for all of us.
Right. But you remove that out of there. See, like when you say the devil rules, Jesus destroyed Satan. Hebrews 2, he destroyed Satan at the cross, cast him out, mm-hmm. he judged him, he bound him, he spoiled principalities and powers. And that's available for anybody. Mm-hmm. That victory that Christ gave over Satan is available, mm-hmm. but unless Jesus said, you didn't choose me, I chose you.
Yeah.
See, so as far as salvation, as far as that, Christ is in control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the good thing about that, well, you know, it's so great that you know how much God, our Father, just loves us. He loves us so much that he gave his only son so we would receive salvation on the cross. And at the same time, he loves us so much that he'll let us go to hell if he want to. That's how much he loves us. And he know how terrible he done the most awesomest thing that was possible to do, to die on the cross, because he know the worst place you could possibly end up is in hell. He said ain't nobody on this planet gonna do nothing to nobody so bad that they deserve going to hell. The worst person on this that do the worst thing on this planet to humanity don't deserve hell.
Let me give you an example. Jesus said if your right hand causes you to sin, be better to cut that right hand off, and go to heaven with one hand, because you'll get a new one back anyway, than to go to hell with two. Okay.
Then go to hell with two.
But the big thing is mm-hmm. freedom. Mm-hmm. So Adam wanted freedom, right? You can be as gods. In other mm-hmm. words, you won't have God telling you can't eat the fruit off that tree. Yeah. You'll be in charge. So he wanted that freedom, and it didn't work out for him. Okay.
I'll have to agree with you on that. You're the first time I heard somebody say that. But you're absolutely right. I agree with you on that.
So in other words, I say this, you know, because when you're in the jail, you could kind of say anything, you know, because you have them captive, and these guys are tough guys, so they like some kind of tough talk. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I was a slave, and half the Roman Empire were slaves. I mean, that's why there's so much on slavery, because at the time of Christ, half the people were slaves.
Yeah.
Okay. But if I was a slave and somebody offered me freedom, here's how I would evaluate it. Am I going to sin less? Am I likely to increase my chances of going to heaven? Will I sin less with this grant of getting this freedom? Will I likely be to sin less or sin more? And if I discovered, you're likely to sin more and risk your soul, I would say, nope, I'm staying a slave. Because I will not risk eternity in hell for nothing.
Yeah, but you know, and look, I always go back to this. You know, we're at a time where people are not really believing that there is a heaven and a hell. And some people, the enemy is deceiving people to the point where they're thinking, you know, I might as well go to hell because that's where all my friends going to be. We're going to be partying and we're going to be having a good time, you know, because the devil is a deceiver and a liar. And you have people believing that when they leave here, that when they go to hell, they're going to be having a good time. And they don't, just listen to this. if the king of hell, which is the devil, he's supposed to be the one that's going to be in charge. He's the king and he's the one in charge. He's doing everything he can not to go to his hell, for him to go back home, which if he's the king there, he's going to be happy to go back to hell. But he's doing everything he can not to go to hell because he knows it ain't going to be nothing. Because in hell is everything opposite of God. All the love, all the beauty, all that. Ain't going to be nothing there but fire, torture. All the people that go there, that's going to be demons going to have nothing to do but torture the people that go there. Everybody is assigned a demon when they are born. That demon, I believe, once you get to hell, he's going to be the one that's going to be tormenting you through eternity, because they're going to have somebody to torment through eternity. That's where they're getting the people right now. All these people that's foolish enough to think that they're going to be going to hell, partying, having a good time. How you going to have a good time? All the demons and everything is in charge. They thinking they're going to be the ones going to be in charge, and they're going to be leaders.
The fool, Jesus said, fear the fools. Jesus said, wisdom is to fear God, and Jesus said, fear the one who after he has killed you, after you've died, can cast you into hell. That's talking about fearing God, who can cast you into hell. So the fool is one who takes a chance with his soul. Absolutely. The fool is one, if this decision is going to increase your chances of sinning more temptation, more sin, more likelihood of falling, that's a foolish decision. In other words, that's a fool. That's why the father has to tell the daughter, you're not going to marry that guy, because if you marry him, he could take you down with him into hell. Okay? I will not allow you to marry an unbeliever. That kind of thing. But they're not fearing hell when they're making these decisions. They're not fearing God or the reality that, hold on, you're endangering your daughter's soul if you approve that marriage.
Yeah, but by the time you're a teenager or something, really, if you're not raised in a church or anything, there's people that's fully grown and haven't been to church. In America, you can be 40, 50 years old and you still ain't never been to a church. And that's, you can say that's sort of foolish, but that's the way life is. People are misled. The devil has really got people blinded. People are believing that hanging out with their friends, because so many people are dying. See, the enemy are taking out young people right now. He's targeted the young people. They're not going to church and they're making decisions. They're killing themselves with their mouths. Because the greatest power that you have is the words that come out of your mouth. God created everything that exists using words. The greatest power that you have comes out of your mouth.
Jesus said, by your words you'll be justified, and by your words you'll be condemned.
Absolutely. Young people are always talking about, man, I ain't gonna get to be no 21. I ain't gonna get to be no. I ain't gonna make it to be. I ain't gonna make it to this age. I'm not gonna get old, and they're dying because once you say that, the enemy can take advantage of what you be saying, and people and parents. Number one, this is something I was trying to relate to them. Don't be telling your kids, man, you know your friend, he's this type of person. If you hang out with him, he gonna get you killed. You hang out with him, you gonna go to jail, because you are prophesying what's gonna happen to your children, and people are losing their children daily.
Well, you see it because you're around a lot of young people and you have a lot of children yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, but the words themselves speak for themselves. What you're saying out of your mouth, you're going to get. People are saying things just thinking that they're sounding funny, and they're laughing them off. There are people that have just their attitude. There are people that consider themselves funny. And every time they say something to you, they're using negative remarks. And then they say, well, I was just kidding. But the enemy take that.
No. The Bible says, I've had a lot of shows on that. It said there should be no jesting.
Yes.
Okay. And that says this brings the wrath of God. This type of jesting, because we think that's a virtue. We think, oh, he's funny. He has humor.
Kind of stuff.
The Bible doesn't call that a virtue.
No. You have to always say. That's why I'm gonna be agreeing with a lot of stuff for people to be saying. They'd be saying, "Hey, you that? No, I ain't agreeing with that." I'd be saying, and there's even a lot of stuff. There's everything that you say, you have to. It's for real. Just for instance, there are certain songs that you can sing in the church that can be negative. If you sing and they sound good, you dancing and everything, but the words that are coming out are negative words, and not religious words and all that, and people are just singing, and that song don't mean nothing.
No.
No, it don't mean nothing just because you're singing. And I mean, even things like that, you have to you have to be positive in the things that you say.
Remember, Jerry was talking in the group today about hip hop, about the. You listening?
Different music, hip hop and rap and all that.
He didn't. Yeah, but in other words, those words. I think he was saying. I couldn't catch everything, but those words are bad. I mean, what do you think about the music they're listening to?
The words are killing themselves because they are singing death. They just don't know it. Young people, they think that just because the enemy is so deceptive that they are not understanding what he's doing. He got them singing, I might not make it to the weekend. I'm going to die hard. I'm going to take down as many as I can before I get 15, 16. The enemy take them words and they go into places and go into schools and get shoot up people because the enemy take what they say.
Well, the music industry is
making money
pretty evil. There's some wealthy people.
Absolutely. They are definitely controlled. This is not a gospel. They're not being signed by gospel artists and where they got to watch what they say. They got ratchet. No, really, the music that he was talking about, hip hop and all that, how it's bad. No, he don't. See, I listen to what the young people listen to because I got grandkids and all that kind of stuff. But you know, I listen to real music. It's not real music, but the music they listen to. No, ratchet music. See, he wouldn't have a clue what that even is. It's nothing like the music what we used to listen to. Nothing like. You couldn't even relate to it. But all the kids sing it and they know it. Your grandkids sing it and you know it. They just don't sing it around you. But the music that they sing and the words and the things they ain't listening to the stuff you listen to on the radio. And you think that stuff you listen to the radio, how can you listen to that? That ain't nothing.
What they're doing.
No, what they singing when they're at the parties and the mamas and the granddaddies and stuff ain't there.
It's really bad.
Oh no, it's they're at a time where they sing what you used to just think about. They put it in the real words, all the things that you used to just imagine.
All the fornication, all the violence.
The more it's ratchet, the more. Can you say something ain't nobody else said before? You got to say something, the ratchetest, the hardest, nothing said this. Make fun of somebody to the degree. I mean, but all the children, daughters, moms, all them folks, everybody's singing that same stuff.
They're sucked into it, and it's almost purely satanic.
And absolutely, because
and the parents are not protecting them from this because there are no parents in a way.
No, and I mean, and you can't. How can you protect them? Because all of the devices that we have, everything is accessible to everything that you're not listening to. See.
It's right on the phone.
You can't. I mean, we're in a society where you're getting taught up. You're getting trained up on the electronic, all of the devices and everything. Every generation is so much above the last generation that they're even lost.
Like Judy says, Howard says it. You know, these Mike, they taught 43 years. 42. They all said. Every year got worse. The behavior of the children.
Yeah, that's the public school. That's the public school because you took Jesus out of you took Christ out of the schools. It's going to only get worse if you take all Christianity out of the schools.
It happened right here. They had no reason. As soon as I got out of Adams, 2 weeks later, 14 squad cars or whatever. You take that out.
Yeah.
Why did they want to take it out?
Because the public school belonged to the enemy. The public school is not a religious institution.
If you were starting out, what's a perfect scenario? For starting out, let's say a young man in the church wants to get married and have children. Would you recommend homeschooling, or how would you recommend things?
Oh man, schooling. Well, I guess you want to be socialized, so you really need a school. I think you have to be awfully smart to even do homeschooling for number one, and you got to be able to financially secure to do homeschooling. Most families are not financially secure.
Well, you know what? I just saw a video clip, and a couple ladies, 3 ladies. Okay, mm-hmm. One was a newscaster, and the lady, she's saying, "Get them out of public school." A sophisticated lady. Mm-hmm. And then the other lady goes, "Yeah, but not everybody can do it." And the other lady says, "Yes, they can." Mm-hmm. Yes, they can. In other words, she's saying, I rebuke that. Yeah. I'm not putting up with that. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying,
But you can't.
That was a lady saying you can do it because these are your children, and the definition of education is primarily, Webster's dictionary is discipline. That's the core notion of, a disciple of Christ. He's a student of Christ. He's a disciplined one.
Yeah, but like I said, if you got a single family household and the mom is working.
No, you tell your children your goal is godly offspring. Your goal is the woman at home. The Bible says she is commanded to be a keeper at home, and the man is to be the provider and protector.
Yeah, that's
and
the
you
one
start
part.
teaching
you need
them
all three
when they're
you need both. Number two, you need those two components: the parent, the mother, and the father. You got to have those.
And
two
you start
components.
teaching them in kindergarten. You better make this your aim, okay? But they're not being taught this to make it their aim.
Yeah, and then there's so many different issues, but you definitely have to start putting the foundation in them at home. But you see, even a family that's saved still have to send their children to a school of unsaved children.
But you don't have to. You don't have to. Okay, I brought the idea of homeschooling back home in Wisconsin. Nobody had homeschool in our town, and I gave them all the literature. And my friend was against it, but his wife was for it. The first child went all the way through homeschooling, never put one foot in that government prison, I call it, okay? Because if you don't have to go to prison, why would you want to go, okay? This is Oliver Smith, Peter Helland on Citizens for Community Media here in South Bend, Indiana.